Hey, thanks for clicking on the video. Today I've decided to take a look at one of the newest additions to our arsenal in Act 2. With the release of the most recent update, we got 3 new weapons that can actually drop from anywhere as long as you have the appropriate tonic. These new weapons were Noxious Vetiver, Scavenger's Fate, and Grid Skipper. Today though, as you can probably surmise from the thumbnail and title, we're going to be taking a look at Noxious Vetiver, an ARC precision SMG with perks poised to take advantage of the newest subclass synergies. Also, if you are curious about how to get caught up with Revenant or what to do in order to most efficiently farm this SMG among the other weapons, I have an Act 2 guide out right now, linked in the top right and in the description below. But getting on with it, when taking a look at any weapon, we're gonna want to see its full perk pool, which is right here and offers a couple of interesting roles. In the left column, we get access to Loose Change, To the Pain, Thresh, Unrelenting, Attrition Orbs, Pugilist, and Heating Up. Then in the right column, we have Jolting Feedback, Target Lock, Frenzy, Redirection, Vorpal, Desperate Measures, and Rampage. First, bringing our attention to the left column, there isn't much here that jumps out as super unique or why you'd want to use this weapon specifically. The perks I want to dial in on a bit are Loose Change, Thresh, Attrition Orbs, and Pugilist. Loose Change is an often overlooked perk that actually has some legs here when we discuss roles in just a moment. But as for its functionality, it mainly exists to increase reload speed, giving us plus 50 in that stat when applying an elemental debuff. Again, we'll see why this works in just a second. Next down the line is Thresh, and it isn't a perk I'd recommend at all, but I want to mention it simply because it feels like a long time since we've last seen this perk roll on a weapon. And interestingly enough, it's actually coming back at a pretty good time where roaming supers are popping off like crazy. So on an actual note, this perk might not be an instant delete because you are getting slight extra percents of your super bag on kills. Granted, it isn't that great of a perk. So back to worthy perks. Attrition Orbs is a perk that has seen a healthy rise in popularity, mostly thanks to multi-mock being available from Banshee with the Attrition Orbs plus Kinetic Tremors God roll. But here on Noxious Vetiver, it's not a bad perk at all, but probably not my first pick when we discuss rolls in just a second. And then for the last perk in this column that I'm actually considering, Pugilist is always a great option. Getting 10% melee energy back per kill is genuinely perfect for 90% of the builds out there. If you're running Consecration Slam, Pugilist is great. If you're doing anything with Arcane Needle, Pugilist is great. And then Hunters don't really need it, but you've got everything else. Again, this left column looking at all the perks, it isn't the most interesting out of any weapon, but it's definitely not a bad list. However, moving over to the right column, the big perk, and pretty much the only thing we're concerned with, is Jolting Feedback. Other than that, Frenzy is here for 15% more damage. This is the first SMG to roll Redirection, which is kind of interesting. And then Desperate Measures and Rampage are some classic standard damage perks. But if you and I are going to be honest, there is really just one perk in this column, and it's Jolting Feedback. Now, as for how this new perk, as it's new with Revenant, as for how it works with this SMG specifically, after firing 18 bullets, the next shot that lands is going to jolt your target. This is mag dependent, so that's in my case of having a max mag of 29. But whatever mag size you get, it's gonna be around that 20 bullet mark when the jolt actually applies. And then looking at the perk as it states, this happens quicker while amplified. So looking at a target, this brings it down to around 15 bullets. It's also important to note that this buff will proc even as you move from target to target. Like right here, I was counting down the bullets and this dude just jumped in and took the jolt. This gives Jolting Feedback the ease of use to spray down multiple enemies without much worry of if you're wasting a jolt or not. But at the same time, this perk's functionality makes it much better at dealing with higher health enemies, and by extension, enemies within the endgame. The real discussion that comes up though is whether it's this versus Volt Shot. And if you've used Ikelos SMG or Subjunctive with Volt Shot, you've run into situations where you just can't get a kill to reload and proc the jolt. Noxious Vetiver here sees that hurdle and clears it with ease. Actually, even easier when it's not in on-level content. Genuinely, with how quickly things fall over and strikes and the like, you actually just proc Jolting Feedback less than when everything takes like a mag to kill. This perk actually ends up being a lot like Kinetic Tremors in that sense. And then extrapolating on the perk, a jolt that requires no kills is perfect for anti-overload reasons. As you likely know, jolting will stun overload champions. So if you think about this weapon like that, we technically always have overload SMG on Noxious Vetiver. But that'll really only become apparent next episode as Overload SMG is present on our current artifact. But before continuing to look at jolting feedback and more importantly what roles we can aspire to use, there is also its origin trait, which is quite the unique one. Dark Aether Reaper gives us these floating blue orbs that we can shoot or physically run into to cause an explosion and reload/overflow our mag. These will spawn after killing 4 red bar enemies or quicker with higher tier enemies defeated. And if you run the enhanced Ether Generator artifact perk, it's gonna spawn 2 at a time. These orbs are fantastic for a reload on the fly, a little extra damage, but the thing that I like the most is that they simply allow us to shoot for longer. Also, a cool interaction is that the reload triggered by the explosions also proliferates to other Dark Aether weapons. So that means if you've got a Bittersweet or a Liturgy equipped, those are going to get reloaded too. So with that quick explanation, having looked at its origin trait and all of its perks, what's actually worth running? Well, the first one that jumps out at me is Loose Change plus Jolting Feedback. This is a simple synergy of shoot the gun to jolt, the jolt increases our reload speed with loose change, easy profit. Honestly, I would put a lot of emphasis on this role specifically because Noxious Vetiver has a pretty slow and cumbersome reload by default. But then when you consider Dark Aether Reaper and the mag/reload benefits there, a quicker reload isn't totally necessary. You could also aim for a reload masterwork and a good mag perk to get that down to your liking. In opposition to the loose change plus jolting feedback roll, I think what I'm looking for most is the pugilist plus jolting feedback roll. This is a perk combo with a lot more to give than just a good feeling gun or a lethal gun. With this roll, you can slot it into any melee heavy loadouts and have those builds actually be elevated. I'm also pretty certain jolting feedback counts for pugilist kills, which means you should be getting lots of melee regen with this roll. Granted, I am still missing this to try myself, so if you happen to have this roll, I'd love to know how it feels. But then there is one more combo to talk about, and this one I expect to be very popular, that being the Attrition Orbs plus Jolting Feedback roll. With similar activation requirements on both perks and the same roll existing on Pyroelectric Propellant, which is turning out to be very popular, this may even end up being the most popular combo on Noxious Vetiver. Personally, on a weapon like this, I think I'm more partial to Pugilist due to the actual build potential. But as we've seen with Multi-Mock, Attrition Orbs absolutely has a place within meta loadouts. And ultimately, as we've seen, all you really need to have this gun be considered good is Jolting Feedback. That perk is just fantastic for in-game content, just as Voltshot is, and will be a staple option for any arc weapon going forward, with the ability to dodge strict anti-champ mods and unfavorable artifacts. But to finish this off, Noxious Vetiver is pretty damn good. However, there is also the topic of artifact synergy, where there's a pretty good deal of perks that it can take advantage of. Enhanced Ether Generator is a big one that we've already mentioned. Trace Evidence is another one that's an easy layup with the weapon itself causing jolt, so that means free ionic traces on any subclass at that too. Retinal Burn can be an interesting option to get Noxious Vetiver to blind on top of jolting, which means it can do overloads and unstopped if you were so inclined. And then Arc Compounding, which is our new artifact mod with Act 2, synergizes directly with Retinal Burn and gives you a plus 15% damage increase against blinded targets. And then the last mod is Conductive Cosmic Crystal for 5 to 10% extra damage against stasis debuffed enemies. But I have been playing with this SMG largely without artifact perks to see how it'll fare going forward. And I think it's great, but it's not something you're gonna see everyone run. It's not a rocket sidearm. For most, I think your Ikelos or Subjunctive is fine, or even just a Pyroelectric Propellant if you don't care about the weapon type itself. But for anyone in the market for a jolting weapon, Noxious Vetiver is an absolute great choice. So again, I've got the Act 2 guide up right now if you want to get your hands on one, and let me know what you think about this SMG down below. And thank you so much for getting this far into the video. Your viewership means a ton. I'm on the road to 11,000 subscribers, and I would love to have you there with me. If you want to support me and support the channel, a like, a comment, a subscription goes a very long way, longer than you can probably know. If you want to support me and support the channel, but you can't think of a comment down below, Noxious Vetiver. And with that, as usual, I hope you are having a great day, and I hope to see you around.